Good evening, everybody, as we just kind of open up the doors and kind of allow everybody in from the kind of waiting room. We will begin kind of imminently this 146 AGM annual general meeting of the Cockburn Association. My name is Terry Leventhal. I'm the director of the association, and you're all most welcome to this second virtual meeting at AGM of the Cockburn. And who would have thought that when we conducted the AGM through Zoom kind of last year that we'd have a second shot at it going forward after some 14 months from our initial kind of lockdown in March. But there we go. And now it gives me great pleasure to kind of welcome our president, Sir Sandy Crombie. Sir Sandy, over to you.
Thank you, Terry. And if I could, I'd like to add my welcome, a warm welcome to everyone tonight. I live in Dalkeith, and for the last 15 minutes, we've just had an extremely heavy hailstorm. The ground is carpeted in white, so it's just one of those nights when we should be perhaps thankful that we're able to conduct our business over Zoom rather than trailing across Edinburgh in some quite unpleasant weather to a physical meeting. I'd like to also thank you for your support for the Cockburn. It's rather self-evident, this being the 146th annual general meeting, that the Cockburn has been around for a long time, and it survives for no reason other than that it's a very well-supported organisation with committed membership, and I thank you for the support that you give. We have 72 locations participating at the moment. There may well be more. We were expecting anything up to 100, I think. So we will let them catch up as the evening progresses. But let me explain how I would like to run the meeting. Normally when we meet physically, I would say, please keep all your questions to the end. But what I propose tonight is, as questions occur to you as you go through, that please would you record them on using the chat function. Just type us a message. And I think when it comes to the end of the meeting, it'll be far easier to run a question and answer session by working from the text messages that you send via that chat function. Second thing I'd say is that normally we would have some form of voting procedure to approve the minutes, to approve the reappointment of the independent examiner, and to approve the appointment or the election and re-election of members of council. Voting is quite a difficult thing through this medium. So what I would propose is that we approve these things by general acclamation, and that with your permission, we'll take silence as acceptance or a lack of a message. But if you wish to record a vote against, then please send a message via the chat function again, and you will know or note that via the chat function, if you wish to, you can send a private message rather than a broadcast, and you can select, if you would, select DJ as the recipient of a private message if you wish to record a concern about approving any of the minutes, the reappointment of the examiner, or the election or re-election of members of council. But I think the final thing I would say is that we will call a hard stop at 8 o'clock. I'm sure many of us would like to have dinner this evening, perhaps relax and have a glass of wine or something. If there are any questions unanswered at 8 o'clock, either because there have been too many questions or a question has been asked for which we do not have an immediate answer, then we will supply answers in writing after the event. But we will try to ensure that either tonight or afterwards, all questions are answered. So I'll stop there and move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes of the 145th AGM. What I'm going to do here is give, we'll come back to this, or any item that requiring approval. I think we need to come back to at the end and see if there have been any objections lodged. So as regards adoption of the minutes, we'll have an opportunity later to just confirm that they are adopted by general acclamation. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask Terry to give us the latest thinking on one item which is carried forward from, I think, the 144th AGM. That's the matter of the SKIO. So Terry, would you deal with that issue now, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Sir Sandy. Members will recall that a decision was made to change the constitutional structure of the Cockburn from an unincorporated association, as we are now, into a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation, or SKIO. We've continued to kind of work towards that kind of aim slowly, and where we are is having produced a project kind of plan for delivery. We've been considering a number of the complexities in behind it before we actually push the button and kind of go, which we would hope to do sometime over the next few months. Just to be clear that the process of establishing the Cockburn as a SKIO, which creates a legal personality of the organisation and therefore gives protection to the trustees and to its members overall, which is a good thing, essentially means that we need to create a new charitable organisation in its entirety and then close and collapse the existing one. And the complexity that means for the Cockburn is it's not just about creating a new constitution and new rules of organisation, but it also means things like 2P, the transfer of undertakings and pensions for our employees, the transfer of physical assets such as our offices in Trunks Close, and the shifting of an investment portfolio over into a new organisation. But at the same time, we would need to kind of establish new bank accounts, close down other ones, which means communicating with all of you for the transfer of any standing orders or the like. So you can see it's been quite it will be a complex process, which we will begin kind of initiating all that kind of formal work shortly, and it'll take us certainly into the next year. So that's just where we sit for that. I'm happy to take any questions at the appropriate time. Sandy.
Okay, thanks, Terry. As I've said, we'll come back and confirm that the minutes are adopted if at the end of the evening no significant objections have been lodged. I'd like to move now to the report from the chairman, Professor Emeritus Cliff Haig. Cliff.
Thank you, Sir Sandy. And can we start the screen share, do you think, please, Terry? And hopefully I can get this right. Just takes a moment or two usually. Okay. Can I just check if Terry or DJ, can everybody see that okay? Is that on screen now?
You can, Cliff, it's all up on screen.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, first of all, just again, thank everybody who's a member, and particularly those of you who've managed to join this meeting this evening. Without you, there is no organisation. So your role in it is really important and greatly appreciated by those of us privileged to serve you on the Council of Trustees. So you will have had a chance to look at the printed version or the e-version of the report that I've written. And I'll recap basically that in what hopefully will be about a 10-minute run through of the last year. I've just got this first slide on just as a reminder of a comment from Lord Cockburn all those years ago, that this place is not exempted from the doom that makes everything spoilable. Something to ponder. Right. So for all of us, I'm sure it's true in your own lives as well, 2021 has been a year like no other. We took the decision, as we reported at the last AGM, not to furlough staff. That decision was taken in middle of March of last year. And it was taken in a situation of considerable uncertainty at that stage. We didn't quite know what would happen next or how long the disruption would go on for. But the trustees took the view that going into the furlough scheme, while it would have saved us a considerable amount of money, would also have had the effect of putting the association into hibernation. And we thought that it was absolutely the last moment where we wanted to do that. So we've carried on this year with a situation where the three staff, the three employees of the organisation have brilliantly worked from home. Although Terry has kept checking the office and often goes in there to make sure mail and so forth is uplifted, and the telephone messages are picked up. But basically, staff have worked from home, and of course trustees have also worked from home. So we've held the various committee meetings, we've convened the Edinburgh Civic Forum. All these things have been done on Zoom and from home. And clearly it was a new experience for all of us. And again, to recap a bit overlapping with last year, we came into 2020 very much on a high with great momentum with the huge event that we held in Central Hall, Tow Cross, in January of that year, around the theme of City for Sale. And the scale of that event, the numbers who came, the momentum it generated, meant, I think, that it did put us in a strong position to set the agenda and to have our voice heard and the voice of our members heard throughout the city. And that was really what we were planning to do next when the pandemic came. We were planning to have follow-up events. We were planning to have a meeting for new members and so on. But all of that, of course, had to be put on one side. And I think where we are now reflects what we've done in the circumstances. And hopefully we can, before too long, get back to being a fully face-to-face organisation, or at least a blended organisation in terms of how it operates. So we quickly made the switch into a more digital world. And some of you may have been able to follow some of the events that we've done during the year. If I just highlight in particular the one that we did, I think it was in June of last year, where Mitchell Silver, the Parks Commissioner for New York, joined us, and we had a really excellent discussion about how he manages the estates of the parks in New York. And I think everybody who was at that event really found it inspirational. Mitch has recently retired and has promised that once things improve, he'll get over to Edinburgh. So we look forward to that. And the Zoom style event was carried forward into the week before Doors Open Day, where we ran 5, one each night, Monday through Friday, 5 hidden history presentations and discussions. And the image just captures one of those. But this was, again, I think, a really good and innovative way to keep the organisation visible and active and reaching out to new members and new voices during what was, to say, a difficult time for all of us. Then taking this forward into 2021, in January, 30th of January, we put on the most ambitious event yet, which again, hope some people were able to be at, if only online. It was in effect a one-day event, a morning session and afternoon session split into 2, where we had a wide range of experts on panels discussing various aspects of the festivals in Edinburgh, where they've come from, which way they should develop. And again, we were privileged to have support at that from leading journalists such as Joyce McMillan and Stephen Jardine. So in this respect, I think we put on really top quality event for members and for non-members who could also join in. And I think great credit to the staff team who worked extremely hard to make that possible, and many thanks to all those others who contributed their time to make this a successful event. In the process of all this, we had major challenge with respect to Doors Open Day. As I'm sure all of you know, Doors Open Day for 30 years or so has been our flagship event. And each year, literally thousands of people have gone around various venues in Edinburgh, enjoying the chance to peek behind the doors, see places that you normally can't get into. And it's been a great family event and a much loved part of the annual calendar. And all of it essentially run by the Cockburn Association with the support of a small grant from the City Council. Clearly, that traditional Doors Open Day was not going to be possible. That became increasingly apparent as the weeks went by from March, April, May, June of last year. And again, I have to give great credit to all the staff, but particularly Dr. DJ Johnson-Smith, who launched out, and we provided the first ever digital Doors Open Day. And it was extremely stressful. It was extremely successful. We had entries coming in, I think, even after the weekend, actually, but I think certainly up till the Saturday night. And in all, about 80 venues provided content that was then loaded online on our website, which enables people to make these virtual tours. And of course, one of the benefits of this and of the Cockburn Conversations series has been that it's opened up our events to an audience of people outside of Edinburgh, as well as our more traditional members and supporters. So Digital Doors Open Day, all those venues remain there. If you want a few minutes relaxation, you can pop around and do a tour of any of these many events. The ones I've displayed on the screen here is just a few of what, as I say, were about 80. And as part of this, we finally got a much improved website, which we've been aspiring to achieve for some time. And again, we've had a lot of time and effort has gone into both using that website initially for Doors Open Day, but also then transferring archived material from the old website to the new website. And I think that process is still going on. But what the new website has done has given us a much greater facility to put out blogs and comments and to be much more engaged with you as members. So if you haven't already checked it out, I do encourage you to go and have a look at the Cockburn's website, and you'll find lots of newsy comment and articles, as well as the Doors Open Day and other materials on there. And this also reflects what was an ever-growing level of activity on social media. And I've just put that one figure up there: more than 1,000 people viewed that January conference on Whose Festival Is It Anyway, which was live streamed on Facebook. So we're very active on Twitter. You can see on the left there, we've got almost 10,000 followers. And we've been able to also put stuff on Facebook and keep a constant flow of information and comment and profile there. And I'm sure members will appreciate that in the world as it is in 2021, an active presence on social media is really fundamental to the visibility and campaigning capacity of any organisation. And we now managed to reach that, and great progress has been made this year. Also, in terms of the improving the software and the digital side of the organisation, may sound dull, but it's really important. The way the Cockburn has traditionally handled your membership was rather antiquated, to be frank. And it means that a lot of time of staff has had to be taken up in chasing people for update of for renewal of membership, or even just basic information. So we've cleaned up the membership base. We've got a much more effective way now of drawing data about the pattern of membership and the collection of membership renewals. And as I'll come to in a moment, that's really important to our financial sustainability. So again, serious progress has been made in recent months in respect of the software for managing membership. In all of this, we've still been active in more traditional print forms of media. We have been able to provide a printed newsletter to those members of the Cockburn who are not able to access digital sources. And we've also continued to have a presence in the local press, the Scotsman, the Evening News, and at times that has brought criticism back at us, as you can see from the article on the right, where Major General Buster Howes had some unkind things to suggest that it was the Cockburn that was turning Edinburgh into a medieval theme park, as he called it. We thought it was something to do with the plethora of Airbnbs, but never mind. But in all of this, I think it shows that our voice is being heard, that we have visibility, and that we can set agendas that require responses for others. There's a limited amount we can deliver ourselves, but our role has been to try to provide argument and ideas and constructive suggestions about the way forward for the city. So the big message from this year, I think, is this digital transformation. But of course, there are question marks around it. How do we help those members who are not online? And that one's really, really difficult, because there's no way we can send out a postal copy of everything that's going on in terms of social media. So we're still working on that one. There's also the challenge, which all charities are facing, I think, of converting that wider reach into donations and new members. The general pattern, which I'm sure many of you have been in other Zoom meetings, and also many of you probably registered for other Zoom meetings and not actually got there in the end. The general pattern is that you get probably a half to 2/3 of the people registering actually turn up to your meeting. All the advice we've had is that it's counterproductive to try to charge, and I can confirm that I spoke for some other organisation fairly recently, that they tried to charge £10. They really didn't get much of an audience because of that. And a number of people put donations in, but it's not the same as our capacity to stand at the door of a meeting with a bucket and shake it and get money. But most crucially of all this year, coming back to what I said earlier, was the loss of Doors Open Day income. We could still put on a digital event, and I think did so brilliantly. But what was impossible was to get sponsorship for that event. We weren't even sure it was going to happen for quite a long time, or to get advertising revenue. Now, we hope that some of these things may be more optimistic for this year, as we've now got data which we didn't have before about, for example, the number of visits onto those virtual Doors Open Day venues that I showed the image of a few moments ago. But it means that we have faced a difficult time in some respects. This comes at the same time as we've had a record increase in membership during 2020, when over 100 new members joined. And if you're amongst those here tonight, you're very much welcome in the organisation, and we really appreciate your support. And as this graph shows, we recruited particularly following the City for Sale event, but the pattern was quite healthy through the year with a steady stream of new members coming in. So real success, and again, suggesting that we are providing events and relevance to an increasing number of people in the city and beyond. However, and unfortunately, the Treasurer has had an operation today, minor operation, but it means he's not able to be with us. But I just put together here the pattern of income and expenditure. If Robin were here, he could talk in much greater detail about it, and we do have the financial report to come later. But what you can see is the pattern that basically we always spend more than we take in. But that's been a conscious and managed process. We've had a coherent budgeting strategy. Where it begins to get a little bit more wobbly is in this last 12, 18 months, where you can see on the right-hand side, the gap between income and expenditure widened quite considerably compared with previous years. That reflected a couple of things. One, we got no significant legacy money this year, like in 2019-20. And secondly, again, the loss of Doors Open Day income to set against the time and staff costs involved in putting that event on. So, so far in 2021, the pattern, I would say, looks similar to last year. Again, the Treasurer, where he could talk in more detail. But it does mean that we need to keep increasing membership. We need to grow the legacies. We need to grow donations to sustain the activity. We do have a fundraising action plan that was agreed last November. And this is just the kind of headline of it. And importantly, we see that to raise funds, we actually have to remain relevant, to be effective in communication, and to be working for public benefit and be seen to do that. So without those things, you wouldn't be giving us your hard-earned money, and nor would any new members come forward. And then we've identified various streams and ways in which we think we can generate extra income. And as you move into the next quarter, increasingly activities will be rolled out in respect of all these headings. So we are actively working on it, but we recognise that there are challenges ahead. So in summary, it's been, I think, a quite momentous year, a quite pivotal year in the long history of the Cockburn Association. We've moved from being an analogue organisation to a digital organisation. We're more active, I think, than we've ever been before. And you'll hear later from my colleague Andrew about the work of the Policy and Development Committee, which has looked at many applications and proposals in the city. And I'm deliberately not talking about that because he will cover those things. But the main message I've got is that we do need to raise income to sustain this level of activity. It comes from having a really dedicated and expert small team, but we need to raise income, and you can help that by renewing your subscription when it falls due. It really would help if more people paid on time. If you don't know when your subscription is due, check that out, and please try and make your renewal timely so that we don't spend staff time chasing people in arrears. Also, I know this may sound really basic, but please make sure that you're paying the right amount. The subscription is now £40 for an individual or £60 for a couple per year. Some people who particularly taken out standing orders some years ago are not actually paying these rates. So please, it would really help us again if you could make sure that your subscription is the right one. help us talk to your friends, help us find new members, and particularly new corporate members. And that's one area where we're aiming to have a push to try and get more businesses involved as supporters, and through what's really quite low-cost corporate membership. Please remember the Cockburn in your will. Legacies are really important to us. That's the only reason why we've been able to operate in this deficit financing model, is because of past generosity of members remembering us in their will. And finally, if you're able to, please think of making a donation. And the reason for all this goes back to Lord Cockburn's comment from 1849 that I put on the right-hand side there. Incompatibilities between private and public interests, bad taste in proprietors, inconsiderate use made of their powers by public authorities. He saw those as challenges in 1849. We still see them in 2021 in the city around us. And it's thanks to the Cockburn that there's activity on these matters, challenge to those proprietors and public authorities, and a voice for civic society in this unique city of ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. It's a very impressive collection of achievements this last year in, I think, the most difficult circumstances that many of us will have experienced for some time. Before we move on to the Treasurer's report, which Terry will deliver, I think we've had more than a dozen new arrivals since the meeting started. So just to explain to them, we are using the chat function for questions that arise or comments that arise on the way through the meeting. So if anything occurs to you that you want an answer to, then please record it on the chat as the thought occurs. We're also using the chat function as a means of recording dissent, should there be any, on any of the three items that require approval tonight. So that these are the adoption of the minutes, the reappointment of the independent examiner, and elections to council. So if anyone wishes to record in any form of dissent, then please use the chat function, and it would be perhaps advisable to send a private message to Dr. Johnson Smith, DJ, to his friends, and you should be able to find them on that chat function. The meeting will finish at 8, and any outstanding questions, if there are any at that time, will be answered in a follow-up written form by email. So I'll hand over to Terry, if you could, in the absence of Robin, present the Treasurer's report.
Yes, thank you kind of very much, Sir Sandy. And let me just cue everything up. And usually when you're giving a presentation, when the speaker before you takes up most of your material, it's a great problem. However, in this circumstance, it's an absolute joy and pleasure. So thank you very much, Cliff, for speaking about half of my talk that I'm giving kind of on behalf of the Treasurer, and we wish him kind of well in his recovery. I put up this opening kind of slide of a £1 note from 1949 at the Commercial Bank of Scotland, which featured kind of Henry Cockburn in it, just to remind ourselves of how well respected Lord Cockburn was in his day. This came out from a blog doing some archival work that we do with our kind of volunteers, when we just posted, this interesting notion of there being a £1 note, and we wondered whether any kind of existed. And a member, out of their great generosity, went on to a money selling antique website, whatever it would be, and actually kind of purchased this for us and gave it to us as a gift. And that kind of generosity and creative kind of thinking and support is of great encouragement kind of to us, because it shows that kind of interest, but it also perhaps highlights different ways in which you can support the organization. However, in giving this report, I've discussed this with our kind of treasurer, and just to quickly go through the figures, this report covers the period from the 1st of October 2019 to the 30th of September 2020. So it's a good bit out of date. The statement of financial activity and the balance sheet were circulated in the annual review, which was sent to kind of all members. But the full set of accounts is available on request. The full accounts were approved by council on the 9th of March and have duly been submitted to OSCAR, that were the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator, as is a requirement on the appropriate kind of statute. The overall picture, again, I think, as Cliff very well highlighted, was one which we did predict through our management budgeting process. And it's worth just kind of noting to members that in working with the kind of treasurer and with our kind of accountant, Jennifer Mackay, is we now have quite a sophisticated management budgeting process where we monitor and manage on a monthly kind of basis the cash flow and profit and loss statements and schedules for the association. The deficit we had in the previous financial year was just under 50,000, which is where we predicted we would be in comparison, as you can see with the kind of previous 2 years, which Cliff also highlighted. And it's worth just explaining that a bit. Certainly the loss of income from Doors Open Days was a critical factor, as was a reduction in other forms of income. But in previous years as well, in 1920, we did benefit from a substantial legacy from Miss Woodburn, who gave us just under 35,000, which was then capitalized and put into our kind of running business. And in the previous year, we actually had over the period a number of voids in staff, which is our most significant kind of expenditure. So that helped. That it kind of illustrates the kind of reason why those figures differ substantially. The total funds in the balance statement, which is in the annual report, however, does show still a healthy bottom line for us of £615,375,000, which you can see compares kind of well against the previous year, given the pandemic and all of the challenges that our chairman kind of highlighted, and noting that we didn't receive a legacy. It is useful, at least to note, with Doors Open Days, however, the City of Edinburgh Council have committed to support us to a small grant of £5,000 up into March 2023, which is a positive aspect, together with the new members coming in. Now, with the capital fund that we have, is the Cockburn does have an investment committee, which is convened by the treasurer, with membership being myself and Andrew MacLeod. We work with wealth managers Brown Shipley, who have done a sterling job over the past few years in actually kind of managing the capital fund for the association. And you can see again in the statement of financial activity where the kind of investment fund sits at the end of September 2020, just over 500,000, in comparison to the kind of value of the previous year, where we have been making drawdowns from the capital fund to actually support the cash flow payments in the organization. The investments portfolio, which is a balanced portfolio, has a number of exclusions, which include tobacco, armaments, and Edinburgh property. And the latter one is in place because of the potential conflict of interest in terms of investments and activity. And it's just worth noting, just to keep members up to date, that we recently made a decision in our last investment committee a few weeks ago to divest from Rio Tinto, which we know some members had some concern. It was a very small component of our portfolio, but we did feel that was an appropriate thing to do given those concerns. Now, the figures I put in below that, the current kind of value of our portfolio still sits at 575,762, which only last week we withdrew a further £25,000 out of to help the cash flow. So it would have been just in excess of 600,000. Now, those who are sharp in the audience will realize these figures don't quite match up, and they don't. The SOFA figures are following the accountancy kind of rules, which include inputs and outputs from it. So we're not really looking at like for like, but the figures I've put in below here just shows the work of Brown Shipley and the investment committee, and how the capital value has been relatively stable over this period of great instability in terms of kind of investments. And I think that it's just to note that the funds which we are managing really on behalf of kind of members are being managed as best as can be done. And our wealth managers are quite bullish about prospects of some of the decisions we've kind of made and the strength of some of the investments kind of in the portfolio. Now, the chairman did take some aspects kind of away from me, so I won't bother kind of repeating what he'd already said. But the note underpinning kind of all of the work of the Cockburn is very sound business practices. We work to an annualized kind of business plan, which helps articulate the activities we do, and the fundraising plan, which Cliff articulated in behind it. And as part of the new website that we put in place, we have been building a new customer management system, which will kind of help us just keep on top of all of the regular membership payments, donations, kind of, etc. And just to help streamline the kind of operation, making it a bit easier for yourselves. And indeed, just only 2 weeks ago, we invested in a new payment system called Stripe, which means that we can take donations or membership from virtually any form of card payment or medium, rather than just the standing order PayPal or check or even cash, whatever that is now these days going forward. So we've been continually trying to kind of modernize and improve our systems to just streamline the organization. So in looking forward, together with all of the mechanistic and systematic things we're putting in place, we have been looking at new ways to encourage kind of membership and other stakeholders as well to support us, whether it's through text messaging. So you can text us on 70085 and just type in Edinburgh and donate £5 to the Cockburn. And we've been encouraging members to use things like Smile Amazon or particularly Easy Giving, which is a website that you can register with and at no additional cost to yourself. If you book a holiday or buy a fridge freezer from John Lewis, or go shopping in a bookshop or clothes shopping or whatever it is, it means that a percentage of your purchase will be given as a donation to the Cockburn. And we've been running this since kind of Christmas. It's been a slow uptake, so I would actually encourage all members kind of attending this AGM to have a look into that. And there'll be some material kind of up on our own YouTube site, which will help explain it a bit more. However, it should be noted that the challenges ahead of us are significant. Anybody involved in charities and charitable fundraising knows that the income or and the support coming into all charitable organizations is diminishing and is in a more challenging fundraising environment. So when we launch the full new website in the next few weeks with all of the content, we will also be launching a series of fundraising campaigns with it as well. And your continued kind of support in that is kind of absolutely kind of vital. So that really ends the kind of Treasurer's report. And just kind of while I have the floor with the slide in front of me, Sir Sandy, just to note that the association is required to have its accounts independently examined each year by suitable qualification, and it is proposed to reappoint Sheen and Tate as the association's misspelt independent examiners for the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for delivering Robin's report in his behalf. The next item is the reappointment of the independent examiner, but as I've said earlier, we will take that as accepted by acclamation unless any objections are recorded before the end of the meeting. Following that, so I will come back to that, but if we can now have the report from Andrew MacLeod on the Policy and Development Committee. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Sir Sandy. And I think this is like the previous presentations. I think you can probably see a little snap of me down in the corner of the screen. And I'm pleased to say to you that I had a couple of days ago my first haircut since last August. So I'm looking less wild than I would have been a day or two ago. So kind of strange times really that we live in indeed. It's a great privilege for me to serve as the convener of the Policy and Development Committee. And the chair, Cliff Haig, has already alluded a little bit to kind of some of the work that we're doing. What I'd like to do is to say a little bit about the committee and tell you a bit about our kind of past year. And there are the slides, I think, are just about, the slides support this are just about to appear. Thanks, Terry. And we could move on to the first slide. That's it, great. The committee, I'd just like to start with the committee itself. It's made up of a number of trustees of the Cockburn Association. And I think what I would like to say is I think we have a very strong group of people on the committee, and I'm obviously very grateful for the support and the kind of vigorous discussion that we have. We have a range of skills. We have people with a background in planning, architecture, community engagement, government, economics. So we're, I hope, are kind of well placed on your behalf to consider carefully and analyse the material that comes before us. And what we try to do is partly to have a kind of a strategic function to look at the kind of policies across the city, and the policies, government policies that affect the city. And we do quite a lot of work on responding to consultations of different kinds. And the other thing, and I'll say a little more about one or two of those as we go forward. The other thing that we do is what the Cockburn has always traditionally done, which is to look at planning applications, to look at cases, to look at projects coming forward, to look at the pros and cons of these, the impact they have on the city, and where necessary where there are issues we need to take up to comment or object to those. Again, we try now in the last couple of years since the Policy and Development Committee was established in its present form, we try to do this in a slightly more strategic way and to try and focus on both on the kind of major projects that are coming up in the planning system, but also we try to move downstream and try and get things that are coming through the pipeline at an earlier stage. And we have had, for example, over the year, we've had a number of very useful meetings with developers who have been willing to kind of share with us their thinking at an early stage and give us the opportunity to comment and sometimes actually influence the shape of proposals. So that's those are the kind of the key functions that we deliver. And Cliff has already said a little bit about some of the campaigns and successes of the Cockburn over the last year or so. And if we could move on to the next slide. What we obviously try to make sure as far as we can that our work is relevant, that we kind of support the Cockburn role in public debate, and we could provide material and communicate clearly. I think particular things I would draw attention to are the kind of huge success we had. The decision was announced obviously last year, but the work went on in previous years. A huge success over the Old Royal High School, which I think was a famous victory for the Cockburn. I think we had to, there was a lot of consideration and a lot of discussion as to what sort of involvement we should have in the appeal and the case, and whether we should have a QC to put forward our case. And because it involved a considerable commitment of money to do that, but money that we were able, through your own generous and many others' generous contributions, we were able to crowdfund and pay the kind of large sum, the large amount that it took to support the QC at the inquiry. So I mean, I think that with the other kind of stakeholders who were involved, I think we've managed to prevent something that would have been a deeply damaging development for Edinburgh, and certainly would have brought doom. I think many of us would think. And I think if you actually have looked at the report of the planning inquiry reporters, I think it is their conclusion and their support for the kind of arguments that the Cockburn was putting forward on the importance of this building, the importance of the Hamilton building, the kind of neoclassical architecture and its position on the Calton Hill. I think that the planning inquiry reporters really supported that, I thought, in the kind of strongest possible terms. So I think it was a ringing endorsement. Cliff has also referred to the incredibly successful public meeting and the kind of way we were able to bring in over 800 people, which I think is a remarkable achievement for the Cockburn early on last year. And we have continued to contribute actively over the year to the debate on commercialisation and the use of public open space in Edinburgh. And there is actually a further review in progress by the council at the moment on the management of public open space that I will come back to. But I think, again, it's another area where the Cockburn, I think, in the public debate has really made its presence felt. And all of that reflects both the time and the work that our committee members have put in, support with the very strong support we've had from our staff, particularly from Director Terry Leventhal and James Gary, who do much of the work on our behalf, and the support and engagement of the membership more widely. The reference has also been made in the chairman's presentation to our the new Cockburn website. And I would very much commend to you to look at that site. One of the things that we now do is that there are two sections on the site, one of which has, you can access the latest news and blogs. For example, the kind of Cockburn statement that was put out with questions for election candidates, some of what we've been saying on the future of festivals in Edinburgh. You can find details of that on our website, and you can go through many of the issues that we're involved in, and you can see, you can read the kind of material and the arguments that we're putting forward, and I think that's a very it makes a very, very interesting set of information, and I think it's a very valuable tool for us going forward. The other thing we're now doing similarly is that our responses both to consultations, to government consultations, and our responses to planning applications are being published in a separate section, a planning and consultation section of the website. And again, I think I would commend that to you just as a kind of treasure trove of useful information, and the kind of thing and I'll refer, obviously, as I go through this presentation to a number of the areas that are covered there, but just to give you one example of the sort of thing that you can do, we recently, in the middle of April, just in the middle of last April, had an issue raised with us about the terrace, the rooftop terrace that is planned for the new Virgin Hotel in India Street. As a result of that being raised, we put in an objection to the planning application of that terrace because of what we considered were the noise, the nuisance implications that it would have. And you can actually, if you go to the website, you can see the details of what the planning application was and the comment that we made. So it's a very good way for the Cockburn to communicate, and for you as members to be able to keep in touch with what we're doing, and to be engaged in the association. Equally, if you do manage to look at some of this material, and if there are issues and cases where you feel you have something to say, you have some contribution to make, or you would like to sort of you would like to help us and support us and provide information to us, then we would very much welcome that. We're very much welcome your involvement and engagement. Should we move on to the next slide? Obviously, the main thing or big thing that's been hanging over our work through the last year has been the pandemic. A number of speakers already referred to it. We've seen really what has been the most significant, I think, economic and social shock that there has been since World War II in this country. And there are, I think, potentially fundamental implications for the future of Edinburgh arising from that. And I think it's very hard at the moment to see what precise form those are going to take. But I think it is pretty clear that a number of things around the shape of the city are going to change. A lot will depend, obviously, on the recovery. And as others have said, who would have thought we would be here a year on having another AGM on Zoom rather than being able all to meet together physically. But I think we are now hopefully more approaching the end of the pandemic, and the nature of the recovery and the speed of the recovery, I think, will have a big impact on where we go as a city in the future. It is beginning to. I think the indications are that there may be quite a sharp bounce back, but we can't obviously can't be certain of that at the moment, or how that is going to develop. And there are clearly going to be differences across. There are some sectors, as we all know, that are much more affected than others. The tourism industry has more or less stopped. Meanwhile, it's gone down to a very low level. Retailing has been significantly affected by the shift. We're all now buying stuff digitally and online because we've been unable to go to the shop. We all know that there are a number of kind of major retail groups have collapsed, and the kind of shape of the retailing sector is going to look very different in the future. That is going to affect our town centres and our shopping streets quite significantly. There are similar issues clearly around about office employment. Many of us are working at home at present. Gradually, no doubt, some people will begin to go back to the office, but will offices go back to what they were before or not? That's a kind of very uncertain question at the moment. One of the things I think that has been striking over the past year is that one might have thought with the pandemic that there would be the levels of activity in the city and the kind of developments going on, that there would be either a pause or a drop in the pace of development. And that one of the things I think that has maybe surprised us a little bit is that hasn't happened. There is some, I think the sense we have as a committee is that we're seeing some shift in the kind of nature of development and the types of thing coming forward. But we have had as a committee a very busy year, and quite a large number of developments coming forward. Shall we go on to the next slide? So we are, I think, going to see, as a result of what's happened over the past year, there will be some changes that will be transient, and we'll go back to where we were before. There'll be other areas and sectors where that may not so much happen. The other kind of interesting question, I think, is whether we've all, because of lockdowns, we've all been spending much more time at home. We've been moving around, traveling less, doing things more locally. There is the concept in some of the planners talk now about what's called the 20-minute neighbourhood and the 20-minute community, where you kind of do things much more locally and do things close to home rather than going into the city centre or going to another town. Again, there's an interesting question as to what effect that will have on the centre of our city and the way we develop in the future. So moving on, please, to the next. So as I said, that we've had quite a volume of projects coming through. There's not much evidence that we've seen as a result of the pandemic of any slackening in the pace of development. There are some signs, some developments, there's been a shift in emphasis. I think we're still seeing developments coming of all kinds, hotel, office, retail, but there has been a little bit of a shift, certainly away from hotels towards residential, and a little bit of just a change in the emphasis of the kind of developments that we're seeing, but still a lot of major proposals coming forward. So the pandemic clearly has been a major factor in the last year. The other area I'd just like to mention as one that has had a big influence on our work, just going on, please, to the next. We've skipped a slide. Sorry, yes, we're now on the right slide. The other thing that is going forward is going to have a big impact on us all, clearly, is the kind of climate targets, reductions in emissions. And that is also a kind of key driver of policy and development in the city. We spent quite a lot of time looking at some of the city plans that are relevant, that reflect some of this. The city mobility plan was published during the year, and it's a very ambitious plan round about seeking to reduce carbon emissions over the next 10 years, to putting more emphasis on active travel and more emphasis on public transport. And we were basically supportive of where the city mobility plan was and where it was trying to go. But I think our key concern about the plan was that a lot of it is that there are a lot of plans for infrastructure, for investment in transport, investment both in transport infrastructure and investment in public transport. What I think we were concerned about was whether enough attention was being given to how we change people's behavior, how we encourage people to move away from their cars and adopt other forms of transport, and whether what's being proposed in the city mobility plan really does make it as easy and straightforward to do that as it needs to be. We felt that there clearly needs to be major investment and improvement in public transport for the future, but the public transport system across our city does not necessarily reach into all areas and cater for all people as effectively as it could do. And we just had some questions going forward as to how effective the results of this plan were going to be. We're also spending a lot of time, have spent a lot of time looking at the future local plan for Edinburgh, City Plan 2030. We've seen the first draft of that. There's been a consultation on the first version of City Plan 2030, a very large number of responses. There's due to be a further draft plan published later on this year. That has been held up because of problems with environmental assessment and problems with the computer system at the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. But that will be a further version of that will be coming forward later in the year, and that will set the policy framework for the city going forward over the next 10 years. And we are reasonably encouraged. We were relatively positive. You can see, if you go to the website, you go to the comments and consultations section of the website, you can actually look at and see what we said in response to City Plan 2030. We were reasonably encouraged by it, by its emphasis on moving back more towards brownfield development rather than developing in the green belt, on encouraging green space in the city, and on having slightly more restrictive policies on student accommodation. So we made some quite detailed responses and comments to that. If we move on, the next thing I would like to touch on is just come back for a moment to public open space. That's an area where, as I've said, the Cockburn has been very active over the last year in putting forward its views and communicating its views. There is now a City Council-led review of public open space taking place, on which the chairman is represented. Our slight concern about that is that it seems to be more to do with the kind of the way events are managed rather than what the policy is, and just the criteria we should have for permitting events in our public open space. There seems to be an assumption that more events are a good idea, rather than saying, well, what are the quality events that will be a benefit to the city, and what are the sorts of events we should support, and what are the ones where we should maybe not be so supportive. And I think we've just been concerned about the kind of commercialization and the kind of lack of attention the council seem to give to the kind of public value and the amenity of public space rather than the income generation. We've been just trying to emphasize, and I think it's been particularly true in the pandemic, we've seen just how important open space and access to open space is to people. And this is something we have been trying to argue and support as an association. Moving on to the questions of accommodation, pressures on accommodation, short-term lets. The Scottish Government has had a consultation during the year on future policy on short-term lets in Scottish cities. We know this is a particular problem in Edinburgh. The effect on communities, tenement closes, where a lot of the flats are now let out on holiday lets rather than being lived in on a long-term basis by local residents, and the difficulties that causes. There are government proposals for regulation, and that's something that we support very strongly, and we feel very much that there is a need for much stronger regulation of this activity. There is also with the likelihood of regulation coming forward, we've seen quite a lot of applications from landlords to get planning permission for change of use of flats from residential to holiday let, and just to make sure to regularize their position in advance of regulation. And we have very often objected to those, and mainly those objections have been upheld. So that's an area where we have been very active as a committee. Moving on to what the council, the projects the council has been putting in place under the heading of kind of spaces for people. We've seen a lot of changes. The council has had funding from the Scottish Government as part of the response to COVID to provide more space for cycling and more space for pedestrians, extra cycle lanes, more segregated cycle lanes, wider pavements. And we have, well, in principle, we have supported many of these. We have had some concerns just about, firstly, whether the pandemic is being used to bring forward proposals that are not just about the pandemic, but that may become permanent, and just concerns about whether there has been enough engagement and involvement of local communities. We've wanted to emphasize that there needs to be very strong consultation, robust consultation and engagement before these changes become permanent. And we've seen, for example, roadways being narrowed, wider cycle lanes, wider pavements, effects on traffic flows, That may all work very well when traffic flows are reduced as a result of the pandemic, but in the longer term, there may be more of an issue about some of that. The other big pandemic-related issue at present is the way in which the council is issuing licenses, understandably in the present circumstances, issuing licenses to businesses for outdoor activity, outdoor catering and outdoor tables and drinking. And again, the council has been, is at the moment fairly open and fairly active in granting these licenses, but we do have concerns about both about the kind of long-term effect and whether we may see part of a consequence of this could be a big expansion in outdoor space, pavement space taken up by pubs, bars and restaurants, and without necessarily the local community being fully engaged and having the chance to respond. And in some cases, as you can see in the picture on the left, new structures being put in place. We feel again that if these structures are going to be temporary, that's one thing. But if there are going to be permanent changes, definitely the requirements of planning permission should be applied. And again, if you go to our website and you look at the material on our website, you can see the statement and the comments, and we've made some quite strong comments about that. Finally, just quickly, let me run through some of just to give you an idea, some of the major developments that have come before us during the year. In Princes Street, clearly Debenhams and Jenner's, which have long been sort of anchor stores, as it were, in Princes Street, are no longer functioning as department stores. There are proposals to redevelop the Debenhams site that we were given a presentation by the developers on and have commented on. Jenner's, we've had discussions with the owners now of the Jenner's site. We have made comments on the Edinburgh Film House, on proposals for accommodation or new office accommodation at Haymarket at Rosebery House. We've commented on the proposals that in Dundas Street, Fettes Row, what is called Newtown North, for new housing, retail and hotel development down here. There, just opposite, there are proposals in to redevelop on the site of what are now Bupa House and Centrum House, and we've commented on quite a number of proposals for new student accommodation. So that gives you an idea, I think, of both the amount of work that we've gone through, and gives you a flavour for the kind of different proposals that are coming forward. So just to conclude, I think it's clear that following the pandemic and with the kind of needs to respond to the climate emergency, that we're going to see significant changes in the shape of our city over the coming decade. There's going to be, I think, a lot that we need to, there'll be a lot of room, I think, for the Cockburn to contribute to the debate about the future of Edinburgh and the future shape of Edinburgh. And there will be, I think, we're likely to see continuing major changes in the physical and social fabric of our city. And I think a huge role potentially for the Cockburn to play in that. And just to summarize in winding up, some of you may have seen today, I don't know, some of you may have read the big read in the Financial Times, which is about the effect of the pandemic on the future of London. and the conclusion that was drawn, where many of the same factors that are affecting Edinburgh that I've talked about are at play in London also. And the conclusion from that article was, and I quote, "The key to London resurging after the pandemic is that we don't try to revert to how it was before." Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you very much. Very clearly, your committee has been very busy through these times, and we must thank you and all the committee members and anyone else who's helped in the consideration of all of these different projects. We must thank them all for their time given and commitment to maintaining the beauty of our city. I'm keen that we still allow some time for questions. So if I may, we'll take all of the approvals in one go. But first of all, let me thank Jack Hugh, Cindy Mules and Richard Scowthorne, who are standing down, all having served on council. Council is a considerable commitment in time and energy, and we have to thank them on behalf of the association for all of their time and effort over the last period of their time in council. We have 2 council members seeking re-election. That's Alistair Shields and Stephen, if you'll forgive me if I mispronounce this, Stephen Hadjuki. Apologies if I got the pronunciation wrong, Stephen. Alistair and Stephen are seeking re-election to council, and Bill Moyes, Claire Mitchell, QC and Mark Lazarevich are seeking election to council. As said earlier on, we will treat all of the items requiring approval as approved unless there have been any significant number of objections. So let me ask DJ if you could unmute and advise us whether we are clear to go on all 3 of these items requiring approval.
There has been one objection from one member.
Okay, well, as we have 83 still on the call and have had more, I hope members will accept that that all of these items are approved. That's the adoption of the minutes, the reappointment of the independent examiner, Sheenan Tate, and the elections and re-elections to council. We have reached in fact, we've passed the time that I thought we would be calling a halt to this meeting, but I want once again, in closing, to thank all of the members of the Cockburn Association for their interest and support. It is a members' organisation. It is one where it's an organisation of people who do care passionately about their city. Passions won't always take us to the same conclusion. As members, I hope we will continue respectfully to debate with each other the merits of the developments in the city. And if we cannot always see eye to eye, hopefully we will always accept that we are trying to do our level best collectively for the city, which we all love so much. I think on that note, I would like to close the meeting. Thank all those who have spoken tonight. Thank all of those who have participated in whatever form. And whereas I would normally be wishing you a safe journey home, I hope you are all already home and about to enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you.